Hey everyone, welcome back to Anime Octopus. Today, we're diving into part 4 of our series, Naruko as a hidden ANBU commander. This is where things get even more intense as we uncover secrets, strategies, and the deeper layers of her story. Disclaimer, the content on this channel is purely for entertainment and discussion. I do not own any of the anime footage featured here, full rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's get started. Hokage-sama, the exams are scheduled for tomorrow. What should I tell my partners? It was early morning. The sandaime leaned back thoughtfully, pipe resting in his hand as a sliver of sunlight cut across his desk. Several ANBU stood silently around the office, hidden in the shadows. Because of their presence, I spoke in a manner that only someone who knew my situation would truly understand. You could, of course, always leave a clone, the Hokage mused, though you've mentioned before that Pink tends to be spirited. I nodded. That's true. However, Pink is beginning to grow suspicious. If my clone avoids conflict altogether, it may only deepen that suspicion. I have created another safety measure to ease some of my double's concerns, but it may still be wiser to remain cautious. Ah. He stroked his goatee and thought. Then a double will have to suffice for the exams. As long as you receive its report afterward, we can review the potential recruits later. I'll ensure your clone is permitted through security. I'll be present to observe personally. I bowed respectfully. Thank you, Hokage-sama. The office door opened, and the Hokage turned his attention elsewhere. Taking that as my dismissal, I leapt out the window. Below, I glimpsed Team 8 led by Yuhi Kurenai entering the building. They stared briefly as I bounded away across the rooftops. It was nearly time to meet Sasuke for our regular morning training session. Donning Naruko's bright orange outfit, I used the body flicker technique to appear near our usual meeting spot at the bridge. Sakura and Sasuke were already there, leaning casually against the railing. They exchanged quiet words, lapsing into comfortable silence. Sasuke seemed more open lately, a change I couldn't help but feel proud of. Whether it was Naruko's influence or simply the bond of Team 7, I wasn't sure. Either way, it made me happy. Yo, Sasuke. Ready for me to win today? I called out with a wide grin, bounding toward them. TCH. He rolled his eyes. That's not going to happen. I chuckled to myself. Oh, it will. Just wait, someday I'll be Hokage. Sakura sighed. Not that again. I thought you'd given up on that dream. I put on an exaggerated pout. No way. I'll become Hokage for sure, and then I can tell you, I told you so. Sasuke chose that moment to make his move. A swift kick sent my clone tumbling head over heels into the water below. In reality, I was clinging to the underside of the bridge with chakra, waiting for my chance. When Sasuke landed to prepare for an attack from the water's surface, I shouted, Wind/Jutsu. Gentle but forceful currents of air sliced toward him. He sensed the danger from above and swiftly rolled aside. A strand of his dark hair drifted to the ground, and he glared up at me. I thought we agreed on taijutsu only. He protested. I shrugged with a mischievous grin. All right then. I launched forward with a kick, retracting midair to twist and attempt a punch toward his midsection. He blocked swiftly, his reflexes sharp for a genan. I followed with a series of strikes, a haymaker, a front kick, a quick right hook. He countered each with calm precision, forcing me to adjust. We traded moves back and forth until I stepped back into a defensive stance. Then Sasuke advanced, pressing forward and exploiting the openings I left on purpose, pushing me to adapt on the spot. By the time Kakashi finally arrived, the three of us were resting against the bridge's railing, winded but satisfied. Sakura no longer seemed suspicious of me, though she still studied me carefully. I bore a few fading bruises, which only seemed to convince her further that no one would go through such effort just to act like someone else. But I wasn't pretending, I was Naruko. I only pretended to have lived differently. And I knew I had to remain careful. One careless slip, and Sakura's doubts might return. My adorable little genan. How was your break day? Kakashi asked cheerfully. Sasuke stayed silent, unimpressed with Kakashi's late arrival. I brightened immediately. It was great. I trained with Sasuke, then we met Sakura and went for snacks, tomatoes. Sasuke shot me a look, as though I had shared a private secret. From my clone's memories, I recalled how the three of them had met up after sparring and gone to the market. Sakura had waved goodbye to her parents, joining Sasuke and my clone as they picked out fresh tomatoes sprinkled with sugar. Sasuke, warming up to us more, even invited his teammates into his home at the Uchiha compound. There, he sliced the tomatoes and made delicious turkey sandwiches for everyone. My clone had been too caught up in conversation and forgot to eat his sandwich, leaving it for Sasuke instead. Sasuke had looked at Naruko curiously when she claimed she'd eat later at home. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, surprised at the story. Our team had been rough around the edges for months, but ever since our mission at the Land of Waves, our bond had grown stronger. "All right, team," Kakashi announced. "Since you've worked hard, today we'll just focus on training. No missions for now. Isn't that wonderful?" Sakura and I groaned in unison. "Come on, Kakashi-sensei," she complained, "a couple of easy missions would be so much better than your training." He sighed softly. "No. The wave mission made it clear that while you three may be equal, or perhaps more advanced, than most Jonin teams, you are not yet ready for the Chunin stage. Teamwork was lacking. Sasuke and Naruko, you both let Sakura wander off, and Sakura, you ignored direct instructions." We lowered our eyes. The lesson had already been repeated back at Wave, yet the weight of it still lingered. Working together was hard for us, we were each so different, sometimes it felt as though we clashed in every possible way. "So then, follow me, and let's finish today's training as efficiently as we can." Kakashi disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Our first task was tracking. None of us had much skill in that area, so the only way forward was to figure out which training ground was closest and check each one. "Naruko," Sakura asked cautiously, "do you think you could maybe try to follow his scent again?" Sasuke looked at me expectantly. Yeah, sure. I can try." At first, my hesitation came from wondering if I'd done this in front of them before. Was Sakura testing me? But no, she was simply being genuine. That was a relief. Closing my eyes, I drew in a deep breath, focusing not with chakra but with memory and instinct. I could always smell the dust from the village markets, the parchment and ink from the Hokage's office, even the fresh scent of grass carried on the wind. My sense of smell had always been sharp, I only needed concentration. Kakashi's presence carried a familiar warmth, subtle, steady, almost like the quiet rustle of iron tools. Following that trail, I let my feet carry me off the bridge and into the forest, the map of Konoha etched into my memory. Sasuke soon noticed signs of bent branches, Kakashi's deliberate hints, and took the lead. After about an hour of wrong turns, retracing steps, and testing guesses, we finally found him in a distant training field. He was calmly seated under a tree, reading, though he stood the instant we appeared. 20 laps around the lake," he ordered. The field held a wide, shimmering pond used for chakra practice. I had trained here before with water-style techniques, though I rarely relied on fire chakra, since it tended to react unpredictably. "You're slowing down," Kakashi called playfully, standing atop the water. He splashed us with a sudden wave. "That's not fair," I cried, stumbling dramatically. "How's it unfair?" he teased, sending another playful spray my way. I ran faster, puffing exaggeratedly, hoping he wouldn't notice my distraction. Lately, I'd felt his suspicious glances. Kakashi had always been someone who could see beneath the surface, someone who understood hidden meanings. I knew I couldn't keep secrets from him forever. But revealing them too soon would only make things harder. Another splash hit me, pulling me back into the moment. "Stop that, Kakashi-sensei," I shouted, though he only gave me a cheerful thumbs up. He sent a spray toward Sasuke, who dodged gracefully, while Sakura, though struggling, kept pushing forward with determination. She always tried so hard. I wished she would consider becoming a medic nin, her sharp mind would make her incredible at it. We finally finished the laps, then moved on to push-ups, sit-ups, and stretches before sparring began. This time, Sakura faced Sasuke while I was paired with Kakashi. "Kakashi-sensei, why the change?" I asked with a frown. He shrugged casually. "Your taijutsu needs polishing. You and Sasuke spar so often that you predict each other's moves. Time to add variety." That was less than exciting. Kakashi noticed everything, even the smallest details. Sparring him meant I couldn't let myself go all out, no matter how much I wanted to. Without warning, I leapt forward, kunai in hand. Kakashi countered with precision, his movements sharp yet calm. I forced my attacks to look sloppy, missing by inches or deflecting late, pretending to struggle while avoiding being cornered. "Wait," I protested. "This isn't fair, Kakashi-sensei." "In a real battle, everything counts," he replied. "But this is just a sparring match." Our kunai clashed, ringing sharply. He met my gaze steadily. I'm testing you. That answer was unexpected. Although I wondered if Kakashi-sensei had begun to see through my disguise, I quickly brushed the thought aside. The idea alone sent a chill through me, but I accepted that my secret could not remain hidden forever. Time would eventually reveal all things. Enough with the silly jokes, Naruko, I whispered to myself, deciding to focus. A shuriken grazed my leg, and I let out a startled yelp, nearly slipping from the branch I had been perched on. Catching myself with one hand against the bark, my training-hardened palm shielded me from harm. Hey, Kakashi-sensei. That wasn't very nice. I called out. He didn't answer. Refusing to give up, I surged upward, chakra flaring around me as I launched to a higher branch above his. With determination, I lunged directly at him. This time, when he dodged, I clung to his arm and gave a sharp pull. For a moment, he lost balance, just enough time for me to slap a paper tag onto his vest. He countered swiftly, discarding the vest and replacing himself with a log through Kawarimi, reappearing at a safe distance. Even though my trap failed, Kakashi lifted a hand in the air with a pause signal, halting the spar. That was impressive, Naruko, he remarked. Your quick thinking caught me off guard. The #1 most unpredictable ninja truly lives up to her name. I beamed proudly and pointed a thumb at myself. That's me. In the next instant, a storm of kunai and shuriken rained down. I substituted with a kawarimi, only to face another wave of sharp projectiles. Again and again, I switched places, each time barely escaping. Finally, I had to meet the barrage head-on, deflecting with my own kunai as my eyes darted about, fully alert. That kind of precision and speed wasn't something an ordinary Jonin could perform. Not even many Chunin or special Jounin. Naruko, Kakashi said firmly, his voice carrying weight. Who are you, really? I widened my eyes innocently. Eh? What do you mean? Kakashi moved in close, his gaze steady and serious. I know you're not an enemy in disguise, because your chakra is the same. But the Naruko I've seen in the academy records doesn't quite match the Naruko I see in front of me. You're sharper. More inventive. A strategist beyond your years. That doesn't fit with the image you usually project. Something isn't adding up, and I don't want empty answers. Well, at least he didn't suspect anything too wild. Still, his intuition made things complicated. Did I really need to continue hiding the truth? Or would honesty with him make my path easier? He sighed, softening just a little. Maybe I'm imagining things. But if it's truly something serious, I hope you'll trust me enough to share it. I'm concerned, Naruko. I wanted to laugh, Kakashi, worried? But his expression told me this wasn't the time for teasing. Kakashi-sensei, I replied, lowering my voice. I may not be exactly the Naruko everyone thinks I am. But it isn't as serious as it looks, okay? Please don't mention this to Sakura or Sasuke. I'll explain. Just not during training. His posture eased, though I could tell his thoughts were still racing behind that mask of calm. Now, are we sparring or not? I shouted with renewed energy. As he dashed forward again, I dodged with a grin. Still, his earlier words echoed in my mind. Did he think I was tied to some secret organization? If so, that misunderstanding might keep him watching me even more closely. Why couldn't I just tell him the truth? Because you're afraid, a voice whispered inside me. Afraid of losing the little family you've found in Team 7. Quiet, I muttered to myself. The voice fell silent. I forced my movements to become a little less polished, matching the Naruko everyone expected. Soon, Kakashi called the spar to a close, satisfied with the results. We rejoined Sakura and Sasuke, who were sprawled on the grass, both breathing heavily from their own exercises. Wow, Sakura, you really look tired, I teased, scrunching my nose. She groaned, got to her feet, and took a swing at me. I hopped away, grinning, while she sighed and lay back down again. It's not like you're any better, she muttered. Sasuke chuckled quietly nearby. What, Sasuke? You think you're above all this? I shot back, and soon we were all bickering while Kakashi ended the session with his usual sigh. See you later, Kakashi-sensei. I called after him, letting him know I'd meet him again in private to explain more. Later that evening, I slipped back into my apartment through the window, carefully disabling my traps. Shedding Naruko's usual outfit, I unsealed a white fox mask from a hidden seal on my nightstand. Sliding it into place, I felt the familiar shift into a different role entirely. Returning to the training ground, I caught Kakashi's silver hair just as an ANBU operative appeared. He bowed and delivered a report, one I should have checked on sooner. I realized with guilt how much Team 7 had distracted me. With a quiet sigh at my own forgetfulness, I disappeared from the spot, well aware Kakashi had already noticed enough to grow even more suspicious. Investigation team, why wasn't I informed sooner? I asked firmly, my tone filled with concern. The squad members bowed respectfully. Kitsune-senpai, one replied, you were not present until just recently. Initially, we assumed the commander's collapse was caused by a chakra-inflicted injury. We now realize that our early conclusion was mistaken, and we will perform more precise examinations moving forward. I shook my head gently. Never mind that. Explain why this misunderstanding occurred. They explained that during the first evaluation, their attention had been drawn to the commander's chest area, as he had been seen clutching it before falling. Believing it to be a direct chakra-related strike, they focused their analysis there. Because chakra scalpels are uncommon outside medical circles, the team quickly concluded that a medical shinobi might be involved. They also noted the presence of alcohol, but since shinobi occasionally relax this way, and the commander had been known to do so without it ever affecting her duties, they did not treat it as a major clue. Reports were then filed, and interviews with Medic Nin at the village hospital began. However, some found it suspiciously straightforward. Would an experienced shinobi really be overcome so easily by just one Medic Nin? Unless there was something more complicated at play. Since the interviews produced little evidence, the squad revisited their evaluation more carefully. This time, instead of focusing on surface observations, they examined the internal effects. They discovered traces of unusual substances that seemed designed to weaken physical response and slow reflexes. With the help of trusted Medic Nin, these substances were identified as mixtures that affected the body's natural balance, particularly its ability to react swiftly. This prompted the team to investigate where such substances could have been introduced. Their search led them to local gathering places in the village. They learned that the commander had chosen to spend the evening in a civilian bar, using a simple transformation technique to remain unnoticed. The Hokage's crystal viewing confirmed this. She had disguised herself with blonde hair and green eyes before entering the establishment known as Down the Hatch. The bartender, when questioned, could not recall much due to the number of customers he served nightly. He did mention, however, a gray-haired individual conversing with the disguised commander. From here, the team theorized that the unusual mixtures had been slipped into the commander's drink, one to gradually slow her natural speed and another to disturb her overall equilibrium. Whoever carried this out must have been highly skilled. I nodded in acknowledgement as the squad finished their report. They bowed again before departing. As I stepped outside, my thoughts lingered on one puzzling question: who could this mysterious Medic Nin truly be? Most medics maintained very busy schedules. Their days were typically fully planned, leaving little time for leisurely evenings. Shinobi, however, enjoyed more flexibility. They could choose how many missions to undertake over a given period, as long as it wasn't a time of heightened alert, when everyone's duties became stricter. Shinobi income depended on the missions they accepted. Medic Nin, by contrast, adhered to a fixed schedule, with day shifts ending exactly at 6 p.m. and night shifts beginning at that precise time. According to the Sandaime, the previous commander had entered the bar at 6 p.m. This suggested that any day Medic Nin could have been involved, as their shift concluded then. However, for this to occur, the bar would have to be immediately adjacent to the hospital, allowing a medic to witness the ANBU commander's transformation and follow the commander inside before executing any interference. The bar was, in fact, located on the other side of Konoha. This meant that the Medic Nin in question could either be from outside the village, a trainee with an irregular schedule, or someone with access to medical supplies and skills not usually displayed publicly. The investigation would begin with the simplest possibilities: the trainees. There were many trainees, though most did not rise far in the medical hierarchy. Typically, they became regular nurses assisting more experienced Medic Nin, which meant limited access to restricted supplies. Still, they often knew where these supplies were kept. Accessing certain materials was not heavily restricted, since they were frequently needed, and excessive security would slow down essential work. With a swift movement, I activated Shunshine and arrived at the hospital entrance, where doors swung open and closed as patients arrived and staff guided them in. I moved forward confidently, adjusting the mask over my hair, knowing the henge seal on my chest was active. I needn't worry about any of the medics questioning my requests. At the front desk, a young woman turned with a bright smile. "How may I assist you, Commander Sama?" "I would like to review the profiles of all trainees currently assigned to this hospital. Please place a small amount of chakra into the verifier." I rested my hand on the softly glowing screen, separating my Kyubi chakra from my natural chakra, and entered only a trace of the latter. Perfect, she said, waiting as the device confirmed my identity. My gray eyes, dark hair, and pale skin appeared under the name Kitsune. She nodded and rifled through the folders behind the desk, then handed me a thin manila file. Thank you, Rika-san, I said. Of course. She replied cheerfully. I sat in a hard, plastic chair in the waiting area, surrounded by concerned visitors. Opening the file, I began with the first trainee, Akirito. The profile listed physical traits, achievements, aspirations, and reasons for volunteering. His brown hair indicated he might have used a henge, but maintaining such a transformation for a long period required substantial chakra. For now, it made sense to focus on trainees with gray hair. Of the 81 trainees, 6 had gray hair, 3 of them female. I memorized their details, including names and general profiles, and returned the file to Rika. Could I also see the schedules for Ito Gen, Sadaki Reimaru, and Yakashi Kabuto? I requested. She nodded, smiling with confidence that I was authorized to access this information. Her brow furrowed slightly as she added, "They're responsible kids. I doubt they'd do anything improper." "We'll see," I replied with a shrug. Reviewing their schedules, I noted that none were assigned during the 6 p.m. hour, leaving other possibilities to consider. TCH, I clicked my tongue in mild frustration. I would need to investigate all 3 of them carefully. First on the list was Ito General. I recalled her profile mentioning that she lived in the middle-class district, and only her father was a shinobi. Her mother tended an apple orchard and earned a living from selling the fruit. The next morning, I sent a clone to my Jinan team meeting spot before making my way to the middle district. It was the largest district in Konoha, but I had a rough idea of where Ito Gen's home was amidst the jumble of apartments and houses. After a few minutes, I leapt onto the street, catching a few civilians by surprise as I strode through the bustling crowd. I cast another transformation over my already altered appearance. Now, I appeared as a plain, dark-eyed, brown-haired, middle-aged man holding a clipboard filled with charts and notes, wearing modest but professional attire. I briskly approached an apartment building, informed the front desk that I was ANBU undercover, and requested they allow me to carry out my work without interference. Then I rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, where the Ito family lived alongside 2 other families. As I rang the doorbell, I formulated a plan. I would introduce myself as Susumu from building maintenance. The apartment below had reported some cracks forming in the ceiling and minor leaks, but they hadn't specified exact locations. I would need to check each room carefully, while paying particular attention to Jen's room. Her mother opened the door, and after I explained my purpose, she allowed me in and offered to show me where all the bathrooms and sinks were. I politely declined. After inspecting the rooms and taking detailed notes, I found nothing unusual. Nothing smelled like the samples I had briefly checked during the ANBU briefing, and I saw no hiding places Jen could have used for anything suspicious. I gave her mother a polite nod and left to continue investigating the other 2 suspects. It was only when I reached Yakashi Kabuto that something caught my attention. He was the adopted child of a head of the Konoha Medic Corps, had attempted the Jinan exam 6 times without success, and had been born in a distant village. All these factors immediately drew my suspicion. Further observation revealed that he was concealing his abilities. I maintained a vigilant watch throughout the day, and at one point, he visited the training grounds. There, after casting a few illusions to prevent any onlookers from noticing, he displayed the skills of a highly trained shinobi. Curious, I sent a clone to call several ANBU members. Once they arrived, I briefed them on my observations and instructed them to keep an eye on Yakashi while reporting anything noteworthy. Meanwhile, I entered his apartment cautiously, continuing my search. This time, I noticed faint traces of the substances. He was meticulous, but not meticulous enough to evade someone with my training. While I couldn't locate the substances themselves, it was clear that he had been involved in their misplacement. The evidence indicated that Yakashi Kabuto had handled these substances without proper authorization. Feeling a sense of accomplishment at having uncovered the truth, I prepared to report my findings to the Sandaime. Finishing my search, I leapt across the rooftops. Konohamaru. My clone. And Sakura. And Konohamaru with his friends. I was curious, but I would not be delayed. I would receive the clone's memories later. "I'll show you a lesson or 2, young one," a voice growled from below. Startled, I paused on the roof, hand resting on the tiles. A Jinchuriki had arrived. 2 additional chakra signatures I didn't recognize were nearby. Peering over the edge, I could tell they were Suna Nin. One of them was holding the front of Konohamaru's shirt, and I frowned at the display of intimidation against a young child. The Jinchuriki must be from Suna, likely waiting for their teammates to finish. That meant the Ichibi was present. The fox spirit stirred within me, and I felt the strain of keeping it contained. The Suna Jinchuriki seemed to feel something similar, as suddenly, she looked directly toward me. I had to remain composed, ensuring she didn't realize I was a fellow Jinchuriki. Then Sasuke arrived, accompanied by 3 shinobi with musical emblems on their headbands. They must be from Otogakur, the village mentioned in the notes I had discovered. No other village bore the name or symbol of music. All of this flashed through my mind in an instant before I decided to descend anyway. Knowing Sasuke, he might act in a way that could escalate tensions, and I wanted to prevent any unnecessary conflict. Moreover, they were confronting the Sandaime's grandson. As an ANBU member, it was my duty to ensure his safety. Intent and authority emanated from me. The Jinan with purple face paint paused cautiously, glancing at me. Her teammate, with blonde hair tied into 4 pigtails, seemed more apprehensive. "Release him," I instructed firmly. "I am ANBU. And the child you are holding is the Sandaime's grandson," I added calmly. "For your own safety, put him down immediately." Their eyes widened. They released Konohamaru and stepped back, just as the Ichibi Jinchuriki revealed herself. "You're making things difficult for our village, Kankuro," the boy remarked, his pale seafoam eyes intense. Dark circles hinted at sleepless nights. Jagged chakra radiated off him, sending a shiver through the air, and even Sasuke, standing on the opposite branch, watched the Suna Jinan warily. The others gasped at the sight of the redhead. She performed a shunshine, landing lightly beside her teammates, giving me a careful once-over. I had suppressed the Kyuubi's chakra as best I could, but still, she seemed to sense a faint trace of it lingering in the air. "My apologies," the Jinchuriki said calmly, her gaze on me. I gave a single nod. "Are you here for the Chunin exams?" "Yes," the girl replied, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're shorter than I expected for an ANBU." I only nodded sharply. "The red slash. Perhaps you've heard of me." She inhaled sharply, as did her taller companion. "I see. Then we shall be going." They turned, moving off with quick nods in my direction. Just as they reached the intersection, Sasuke leapt down, dark eyes studying them carefully. "What's your name?" I glimpsed the blonde girl blush as she replied, "Me? No, the gourd beside you," Sasuke corrected. Ichibi's container shifted. Despite being shorter than his teammates, he radiated a distinct presence. "Sabaku no Gaara," he said. Seafoam eyes studied Sasuke. "And you are?" From the corner of my vision, I saw Sasuke smirk. "Uchiha Sasuke." The Uchiha clan was well known, even if their numbers were diminished. My clone scurried up, eager to inform Gaara, but the redhead ignored him and faced Sasuke squarely. I sighed inwardly. Sasuke's competitive nature could cause trouble if unchecked. I needed to stay vigilant. "Leave immediately," I instructed. They complied, and Sasuke threw me an annoyed glance before dispersing. I continued toward the Hokage's office, thoughts lingering on the looming Chunin exams and the suspicious activities of Yakushi Kabuto, a Jinan whose abilities far surpassed expectations. Arriving at the Hokage's office, I noticed several jounin gathered before the Sandaime, smoke curling from a pipe. I paused outside, listening and waiting to deliver my report. "It would also be interesting to outmatch them," Kakashi's voice said, lightly teasing, though Iruka's eyes narrowed. "What did you just say?" Joking aside, Kakashi continued, "Iruka-sensei, I understand your concern. But I have my own observations." "Kakashi, enough," Kurenai's voice intervened, her red eyes firm. "They are no longer your students. Now, they are my subordinates," Kakashi replied. The tension in the room was palpable as the Sandaime intervened, calming the discussion and ensuring a preliminary exam would proceed fairly. Once the meeting ended, I approached the Sandaime to report my findings. "Hokage-sama," I said, kneeling briefly before standing straight. "I have reason to suspect Yakushi Kabuto. Though a Jinan, his skills surpass that of most at his rank." I presented my evidence carefully. While not conclusive, his concealment of activities was impressive, especially given his prior failures at the Chunin exam. "Precautions should be taken," I concluded. "I recommend assigning permanent ANBU observers to follow his actions and report anything unusual." The Sandaime nodded thoughtfully. "And his teammates?" "Akedo Yoroi and Tsurugi Misumi. I suggest monitoring them as well." He approved my plan, allowing the ANBU to maintain their observations discreetly. Each Shinan would have one daytime and one nighttime observer, trained in secrecy to avoid detection. The day passed with administrative duties, aided by my clones, until I retired for the night. The next morning, my Shinan team received Chunin exam applications. Excitement mixed with anxiety as I noticed Sasuke's familiar competitive smirk. Kakashi approached me later, signaling me to a private spot on my apartment roof. We sat side by side, watching birds pass by as he spoke. "Naruko. You're Kitsune," he said softly. I nodded tensely. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice a mix of confusion and regret. "I don't blame you, Kakashi. Becoming ANBU was the right path for me at that time," I replied calmly. Kakashi's voice softened. "I only wanted you to have a carefree childhood. I never meant for you to shoulder so much." "It doesn't matter," I said firmly. "What matters is that you've been an incredible mentor. You've guided me when I needed it most. I'm grateful for your support, it's what shaped me." He looked at me, sorrow in his eyes, before we fell silent. As I stood to leave, Kakashi hugged me briefly, a gesture of reassurance and care. I felt less alone, able to face what lay ahead with confidence. "Thank you, Kakashi-sensei," I murmured, smiling gently. As we parted, a cloaked Nin appeared, and the henge faded, revealing my former academy instructor. He looked at me with quiet recognition. "Kakashi," all 8 rookie Shinan passed. "Naruko, you're Kitsune?" I hesitated for a moment. "Yeah. I hope you'll still see me as Naruko, and not as Kitsune." My Shinan instructor studied me carefully, then gave a slight nod. I returned a grin, not as broad as Naruko's usual exuberant one, but certainly warmer than the stiff smile I wore as Kitsune. "Well, see you later, Kakashi-sensei, Iruka-sensei," I called out, waving. Adopting Naruko's familiar cheerful expression, I gave them both a bright, genuine smile, effortless and full of energy, before bounding down into the bustling streets of Konoha below. Dear YouTube family, this is all for now. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with more adventures. Thank you for your support. Regards. Anime Octopus.